If anyone has a dream out there, just know that I'm living proof that they do come true.
There's a comforting myth in Hollywood that success, once earned, becomes permanent. That if you stand in the right film, next to the right stars, at the right moment in culture, everything that follows will naturally expand. Bigger roles, longer relevance, and a career that keeps climbing. But Kim Basinger's story quietly breaks that illusion. Because she didn't enter Hollywood as an outsider fighting to get in, she entered as someone the system already trusted. And yet, that very trust would later become both her greatest advantage and her most complicated burden. Long before she became a global screen presence, Kim Basinger was born in Athens, Georgia, far away from the machinery of Los Angeles or New York. It was a place where life felt slower, quieter, and far removed from the idea of celebrity. Nothing in her early environment suggested she was being shaped for stardom. In fact, Basinger has often described herself as naturally shy. Not the kind of personality that instinctively chases attention, but someone more comfortable observing than being observed. Acting, when it first entered her life, wasn't about ambition. It was about escape. A way to step outside herself and briefly exist as someone else under the safety of a scripted world. That distinction matters because it explains so much of what came later. She didn't approach Hollywood as a calculated destination. She moved toward it gradually, almost cautiously, through small opportunities rather than bold declarations. And in those early years, she wasn't treated as a star in waiting. She was simply learning how to exist in front of a camera, how to hold attention without forcing it, how to fit into a system that often decides very quickly who belongs at its center and who doesn't. What makes her journey unusual is that she wasn't trying to redefine Hollywood. She was trying to understand it. And in doing so, she slowly became someone the industry began to rely on, long before anyone fully understood what that reliance would eventually mean. Before Kim Basinger ever became a household name, she spent years moving through Hollywood the way many actors do, in silence. Role by role, show by show, slowly building something that didn't yet look like a breakthrough, but already carried the signs of one. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, she appeared in television work that rarely drew attention on its own, but served a crucial purpose: experience. Shows like Charlie's Angels gave her early exposure to the rhythm of production, the discipline of set life, and the reality that success in this industry is often built in fragments rather than moments. She wasn't positioned as a rising superstar at this stage. Instead, she was being tested in a very Hollywood way, quietly, repeatedly, and without fanfare. The industry wasn't betting everything on her yet, but it was watching closely enough to keep offering opportunities. That trust began to solidify when she moved into more visible, higher-pressure roles. One of the most significant early milestones was her appearance in Never Say Never Again, 1983, part of the James Bond franchise. Being cast in a Bond film is never casual. It signals something specific: reliability under global attention. Even in a supporting capacity, it meant she had passed an important threshold. Soon after, she appeared in The Natural, 1984, alongside Robert Redford, a film built in the language of classic Hollywood storytelling. Here, she wasn't just present. She was integrated into a production that valued restraint, timing, and emotional clarity over spectacle. These roles didn't turn her into a star overnight, but they did something just as important. They placed her inside Hollywood's circle of trust. She wasn't an experiment anymore. She was dependable. By the mid-1980s, Basinger was no longer being introduced as a newcomer. She was being treated as someone who could carry presence inside major studio films without disrupting their balance. And that stability, quiet, gradual, almost invisible at first, was about to collide with a role that would change how the entire world saw her. In 1986, Kim Basinger made the kind of film that doesn't just raise an actor's profile. It redefines how the public sees them, sometimes in ways that are impossible to undo. 9.5 Weeks arrived without the polished certainty of a mainstream hit. It was moody, controversial, and emotionally unpredictable. But what it did have was intensity, especially in the dynamic between Basinger and Mickey Rourke. Their on-screen chemistry carried the film far beyond its script, creating a tension that audiences couldn't easily forget. Critics were divided. Some dismissed it, others defended it. But none of that mattered as much as the cultural reaction. The film became a talking point, a reference, something people remembered more for its mood and imagery than its narrative structure. And almost overnight, Kim Basinger's public identity began to shift. Before 9.5 Weeks, she was seen as a rising Hollywood actress with versatility and promise. After it, she became something far more narrow in the public imagination. A symbol. A sex symbol, to be precise, not necessarily defined by the full range of her work, but by the most visually striking and emotionally charged aspects of one performance. That kind of labeling is powerful in Hollywood because it simplifies everything. It makes casting decisions easier, marketing easier, expectations clearer, but it also flattens complexity. The industry no longer saw her as a blank slate. It saw her through a lens that was difficult to remove. Rather than stepping away from that attention, Basinger continued forward. In Blind Date, 1987, she shifted into a more commercial, comedic space alongside Bruce Willis. The film showed she could function inside mainstream Hollywood comedy just as comfortably as she could in more intense, dramatic roles. But beneath that surface flexibility, a new kind of pressure was forming. She was no longer just building a career. She was managing an image that the public had already started to define for her. And once that kind of image takes hold, even success doesn't always reset it. It often reinforces it. By the end of the 1980s, Kim Basinger seemed to have reached the center of Hollywood itself. Everything pointed upward. The roles were bigger, the visibility stronger, and the industry trust seemed fully restored. Then Batman 1989 arrived, and for a moment, it looked like she had entered the most secure level of stardom possible. Playing Vicky Vale placed her inside one of the most important cultural events of that era. Batman wasn't just a successful film. It was a redefining moment for the modern blockbuster. The scale was massive, the marketing was global, and the box office numbers confirmed its dominance. Basinger was now part of a cinematic phenomenon that shaped how studios would think about franchises for years to come. From the outside, it looked like everything had stabilized. The uncertainty created by 9.5 Weeks seemed to fade into the background. She was no longer being questioned. She was being placed firmly inside Hollywood's commercial engine. But what's often overlooked in this period is how deliberately she resisted being trapped in a single tone. In films like My Stepmother is an Alien and later Wayne's World 2, she showed a willingness to step into comedy, even self-parody. She wasn't protecting an untouchable image, she was actively playing with it, reshaping it, loosening its edges. Still, beneath the surface of this peak period, a different tension was forming. Success had given her leverage, but it also came with expectation, especially around how she would be used in future projects. And it was during this phase, when everything looked stable on the outside, that she made a decision that would quietly shift everything that followed. A role she agreed to, then stepped away from. Not a scandal at first, not in public, but something that would move from creative hesitation into legal consequence and change how Hollywood measured trust forever. When the courtroom fallout from Boxing Helena settled, Kim Basinger's career didn't collapse, but it changed shape permanently. The industry still valued her, but now with caution. She could return, she could work, But the center of Hollywood no longer moved around her in the same way. That shift made her 1997 role in LA Confidential feel almost like a different version of her career entirely. In a film filled with rising stars and ensemble energy, she delivered a restrained, controlled performance that earned her the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. It was a clear reminder that her talent had never disappeared, even if the industry's perception of her had shifted. In the years that followed, she continued working in selective roles, including 8 Mile, The Door in the Floor, and later appearances in films like The Nice Guys, 2016. Each role felt less like a comeback attempt and more like carefully chosen work, present but not centered. By the 2010s and beyond, her screen appearances became rare. She briefly returned in 50 Shades Darker, 2017, and 50 Shades Freed, 2018, marking some of her final major film roles. Today, Kim Basinger is in her early 70s and lives a far more private life in Los Angeles. She is known to keep a low profile, focusing on family and distance from Hollywood's constant visibility. She shares a daughter, Ireland Baldwin, from her marriage to Alec Baldwin, a period that brought intense media attention she has since moved away from. Her story now feels less like a decline and more like a quiet withdrawal by choice, leaving behind a career defined not by failure, but by how a single decision can permanently redirect even the brightest spotlight.